Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, and today is February 26th, 2025 at 8:16 a.m. Central Standard Time. And we are going to be covering Mr. Erik Carlson today because, I haven't covered Erik in forever. That's pretty jacked up when you think about it. So anyway, please hit the thumbs up on this video. Please follow me on Rumble right here. Really appreciate it when you do this. I have become an independent agent just recently. I'm no longer with Badlands, so I got to do all of this on my own. It's exciting. It's a little scary. So if you could give me a little bit of help by hitting that thumbs up, you can also help by ordering products from tulipblooms.shop and use promo code Shapiro for 10% off, and to let me know you're a Reading Epic Threads fan. All right, so we're going to start. Let's see. We're going to start with whatever old Erik is doing. Aha! Erik Carlson on Badlands. Why the deep state can't allow government shutdowns. The lights are on, but nobody's home. By Erik Carlson. And this is on Badlands. So don't forget, badlands.substack.com. He also has Erik C, ERIKC.substack.com. Imagine for a moment you are an undersized, even for your age, freshman in high school. It's your first day at school. You're lost, intimidated, and maybe even a little scared. Eventually, you find your locker and start working on the lock. Across the way, a senior is scanning the hall for incoming freshmen to bully, to extort. As the bully looks over the sea of students, he eventually locks eyes with you. The look on his face says that he's found a victim to prey on, or maybe one of many. The bully works his way over to you and doesn't waste any time. He tells you that you will give him your lunch money every day for protection, and he will be at your locker every morning to collect it. He tells you that you don't want to find out what would happen if you missed even one payment. He says that high school can be a dangerous place without protection. From day one, this is the high school experience that you know. Every morning, your mother puts your lunch money on the kitchen counter, and every morning you hand it over to the bully. After months of this routine, you forget your lunch money at home and come to school with nothing to give your bully. The bully asks for the money, say you forgot it at home. The bully knows he can't allow a precedent to be set. He shoves you up against the lockers with all his might. As you hit the lockers, you realize the shove feels more as if it came from your 8-year-old sister. As you quickly recover from the push, the bully can see a smirk in the corner of your mouth. There is a sparkle in your eye. The bully's shoulders begin to hunch, and his face and eyes show defeat. He knows from this day forward he will never be able to extort another dollar from you. His only hope now is that you don't tell others that there is no need to fear him. He's all bark and no bite. This is the American government in a nutshell. The American government extorts Americans through fear and intimidation. The American government tries to convince Americans that the government plays a vital role in their lives, that without them, everything we know would fall apart. The government wants Americans to believe that they are vital in maintaining the infrastructure. They protect the citizens from foreign invaders. They protect the streets. They provide for you in your old age. They regulate against what might harm you. They provide a healthcare system second to none. In reality, the government isn't merely unneeded. They actually create many of the problems they claim to be protecting us from. They create and incite foreign and domestic enemies. They create bad health, for which they treat us. Because of taxes and the inflation they create, we can't save enough money and must rely on them in our old age for Social Security. Their critical theory and welfare system creates a class of people who can never seem to escape the cycle of poverty. The American government must convince and continue to convince Americans that the government system must continue as is and actually increase in its breadth and power. Why can't they allow a government shutdown to occur, especially now? If the American government was to shut down, people would begin to realize that we don't really need them in the capacity that they exist. That not only would our lives not suffer with them being shut down, but our livelihood would be completely unaffected. The US government can't allow Americans to understand fully just how unnecessary they are. They can't allow Americans to understand that they create more problems than they solve. This is why every time the threat of a shutdown occurs, the rhinos, neocons, liberals, and the media paint a picture of Armageddon in our minds if a new budget isn't quickly passed. As Bill Murray's loser character says in the movie Stripes, as his live-in girlfriend has had enough of him and frantically packs her bags and moves out, "You can't leave me. All the plants will die." He couldn't come up with a single sensible reason for her to stay. He offered her nothing but a few laughs in return. He was a leech, and he knew it. In reality, the government offers us little to nothing in return for what they take from us. These mafia-like bullies aren't giving us protection. They are the ones from whom we need protection. The government can't allow shutdowns, especially now, with Trump taking power in just a matter of weeks. Remember, this column was written on January 11th. The government couldn't allow itself to be shut down a month leading into Trump's inauguration. A month of being unaffected by a government shutdown would lead Americans to believe that maybe the government is too big, that maybe it does make sense to start cutting it back, that maybe some, if not most, of the government is unnecessary. Heading into Christmas break, rhinos, neocons, and progressive liberals were willing to burn the midnight oil getting a budget in place. Why not just wait until Trump takes office to get a budget in place? The government would be on holiday for half the time anyway. It's not like anything was going to get done during this time period. This is exactly why they had to get the budget in place. If that government had shut down leading into Trump's inauguration, when the Doge team starts to eliminate government positions and departments, the American public would realize they hadn't needed the government for the past month, so maybe they aren't that necessary. This is a sentiment the deep state-controlled U.S. government couldn't allow. Heading into Trump's inauguration and shortly after, expect the rhinos, neocons, progressive liberals, and the deep state-run media to attack all the changes that Trump's team looks to make. With Trump looking to make Social Security income tax-free, expect the media to push the idea that the strain it would have on Social Security would cause the Social Security system to collapse. Those who believe the propaganda will be begging for the income tax to stay in place. They may even insist that their taxes go up. As RFK Jr. looks to overhaul the healthcare system, expect the media sentiment to be that RFK Jr. doesn't know what he's doing, that he's reckless, and his changes will cost millions of their lives. They will say RFK Jr. will ban vaccines when in fact he will make them optional. They will say removing fluoride from our drinking water will cause cavities, which will lead to bad overall health. Propagandized Americans will fear they won't have access to medicine and procedures that they believe are necessary for their survival. The stress created by the media will actually cause more health issues. Following the changes to the healthcare system, as was the case with COVID, every death will be blamed on these changes. Every cavity will be blamed on the removal of fluoride from our water system. Every heart attack blamed on saturated fat as seed oils are removed from our food system and replaced with animal fat and beef tallow. The removal of big pharma ads from broadcast television will be portrayed as an attack on free speech, when in fact 70% of broadcast television's ad revenue comes from big pharma, which means they essentially control the media, which means there currently is no free speech in the media. As Trump replaces leaders in the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, the media will claim these departments are being used by Trump to attack his opponents. As criminals are being indicted and convicted of their crimes, the media will say their only real crimes are opposing Trump. As criminals face justice, the media will say they are being persecuted. We've already seen the glorification of a cold-blooded assassin. Expect more of the same going forward. As the military leaders are being replaced, the narrative will be that it will make America less safe, that it will lead us to war, or that these new military leaders are the puppets of our perceived enemies. The deep state will incite tension overseas through rhetoric and false flags. This will occur domestically as well, as they promote fear in some and non-adherence to laws and authority in others. As Trump eliminates or at least defunds the Department of Education, the deep state media will claim the U.S. education system is already inadequate and underfunded, and that Trump's actions will put our citizens even further behind the rest of the world. In reality, he is removing the mind control of woke DEI agendas that are being used on students. As Trump looks to cut regulation, the sentiment will be that it will increase the level of corruption in big business and Wall Street. In truth, the white-collar criminals can't hold a candle to the corruption of the regulators who are in charge of overseeing them. Expect some who have jumped aboard the Trump train to now try to derail it. Not everyone who is speaking up against the deep state is truly MAGA. The deep state has some smart people. They understand that if something is inevitable, like Trump becoming president again, or if it is inevitable that information is going to come out about the deep state, it is better if the information is first exposed by someone they control. Without naming names, be careful of whom you trust. Someone who is exposing the deep state might actually be one of them. But they're exposing the deep state, yes. As I mentioned, if the deep state knew that information was going to come out and there is nothing they can do to stop it, it is better for them to be the first to expose it. If they can gain trust by having their assets expose their corruption, those assets can later be used to lead people astray. In the 1970s, the Church Committee was investigating the CIA and the CIA's abuses of power. The CIA knew there was no way to avoid being completely exposed, so they had their puppet, Carl Bernstein, investigate and write about how the CIA manipulates the media. This shifted the focus away from the CIA creating false flag mass casualty events, assassinating world leaders, controlling and overthrowing governments, to the narrative that your favorite talking head may be getting kickbacks for not saying bad things about the CIA. Who are today's Carl Bernsteins? Be leery of everyone, especially of anyone who came out of nowhere and gained a huge following overnight. Be leery of anyone who has only supported Trump the past year. Be leery of anyone who says one thing and does another, who calls out the Biden administration yet votes in line with them. Be leery of anyone who seems to care more about a foreign nation than America. Be leery of anyone who has never been kicked off of social media or whose reach far exceeds the quality of their content. This doesn't mean you should be negative or black-pilled. Just be mentally prepared to cut ties quickly with anyone who starts to turn on Trump or his allies. No, their opinion hasn't really changed. They aren't privy to new information. They were always commissioned to turn on Trump when the time was right. They may not even directly turn on Trump, but they'll try to sow discord between Trump and his allies. Expect it. With the recent terror attacks in the U.S., I fully expected that it would occur. I understood the cabal wouldn't just give up. I knew that they would incite fear and do as much damage as they could on their way out the door. And this isn't likely to end with Trump taking office. How many terrorists were let into America the past 4 years? How many terrorist cells are waiting to be activated? How many of these terrorist cells are run by the FBI and CIA? Since the day Elon Musk publicly backed Trump, I've been waiting for a false flag event to occur involving a Tesla. My prediction has been that the deep state would drive a Tesla through a group of pedestrians and claim that it is an autopilot malfunction. This would not only kill and injure innocent Americans, creating fear and a distraction, but also hurt Elon Musk financially. When I hear news of a mass killing, a false flag event, I just assume the FBI and CIA are connected to it. How connected are they? Did they manipulate a patsy into doing it? Did they do it themselves? And are they blaming it on a patsy? Was the perpetrator on their radar? Was the perpetrator one of their MK Ultra mind control victims? Rarely do we find that the intelligence agencies weren't somehow directly involved or aware of the threat beforehand. At the very least, they control the media that push forth propaganda that leads to mass killing events. Maybe they convince a transgender person not only that they're living in the wrong body, but that driving to a Christian school and killing innocent children and themselves somehow is making a difference. Who benefits from acts of terror domestically and abroad? I would argue that the military-industrial complex thrives off of the fear of war and terrorism. The FBI and CIA suddenly become more necessary in the eyes of terrified Americans. If it is believed that the acts of terror are perpetrated by radicalized Muslims, Israel immediately garners more support as well. How is it a trans shooter can shoot up a Christian school and we know nothing about the killer or their motives a year later, but we know everything about the recent New Orleans killer within a day? We are even allowed to see that he had an ISIS flag in the truck that he drove. Reporters were allowed to walk through his house the next day. In this case in particular, it is obvious that we are being fed a narrative. It seems as though they want us to know it is obvious that we are being fed a narrative. With everything we are presented, I just automatically assume we are purposely being misled. Today, we're supposed to blame the motivation of the New Orleans killings on the radicalization of an ISIS-supporting Muslim 8 years ago, when a gay Muslim killed 49 people in a gay nightclub in Orlando. We weren't even allowed to acknowledge that he was gay or a Muslim. This wasn't the narrative the deep state was trying to push then, but it seems the Muslim ISIS angle is something they are trying to push now. We must be prepared for more mass killings and false flag events. We must be prepared for more fear-mongering. Every change the Trump administration will look to make will be preceded by propaganda that will be used to convince Americans that the changes will be bad for them and the country. If we understand what is coming, it shouldn't affect us as it will others. Why can't we have government shutdowns? It exposes who is really behind many of the issues we face. How is the government any different from the mob and organized crime? The mafia extorts protection money from businesses claiming it's for protection. It's not a coincidence that in 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve and income taxes were created in America, the IRS was formed as well. If you don't pay your taxes, the extortion money, the IRS will ruin your family's lives. This is the same as the mob burning down your business. The next few months won't be easy for many. Be prepared to offer insight to those who will go into panic mode. One of the best ways to alleviate their fears is to tell them what will happen before it happens. Tell them what the deep state will say and do, leading into the changes that will occur under Trump and his allies. Explain to them why the propaganda will occur when they do panic. Remind them of how you told them it would occur exactly as it is occurring. There is no way to avoid what we are experiencing and will experience. We may not be able to avoid the chaos and fear-mongering, but we can choose how we allow it to affect us. There really was no way to take back America that didn't involve chaos and the loss of some lives, and this is exactly what is happening. America is being taken back. And that's the first one from the great Erik Carlson. Support what we do here by going to tulipblooms.shop. Get the castor blend. Go to castorblend.com. It's a website that I've recently stood up. It's full of all sorts of helpful information about castor oil. Oh my God, it smells so good. The castor blend is a blend of castor oil, 40%. Now you would think to yourself, something that has 40% castor oil, it's got to be sticky as hell, but it's not. Castor oil is very thick, very syrupy, very sticky. But when you add the right proportions of amaranth oil, argan oil, apricot kernel oil, sea buckthorn fruit oil. Come on, dude. Get them all. No, I'm not going to get them all. Damn, what are the other ingredients I'm missing? Jojoba oil. There's freaking jojoba oil in it. Duh. Okay, sorry. Go to castorblend.com. Go to tulipblooms.shop. One of those two will get you there. And get your castor blend. Do it now. Support this channel and support your skin health. And then use promo code Shapiro. Every time I see that, I make a mental note. I've got a real Reading Epic Threads fan here. All right. Let's get another Erik Carlson one. All right, this one is about the mid-air collision in D.C. From ericc.substack.com, mid-air collision in D.C. A deep state warning by Erik Carlson, January 31st, 2025. What was it Q said? In Q drop number 259 of December 5th, 2017, 7 of 10 plane crashes are targeted kills. If you believe Q, then there's a 70% chance that the mid-air collision in D.C. between the American Airlines passenger jet and the Black Hawk Army helicopter was a targeted kill. Was there someone on either the Black Hawk helicopter or the American Airlines passenger plane that the deep state wanted dead? It's possible, but it's also possible that this was a warning to Trump and his associates, the deep state's way of saying, be careful how hard you come at us, because we can still get to you. Trump and his associates not only travel on commercial planes, but they also travel on military aircraft, or maybe it was just a crazy person upset with Trump's agenda. Is it a coincidence that the mid-air collision just happened to occur in Washington, D.C., and it just happened to occur in between RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel's Senate confirmation hearings? Until I hear otherwise, I will just assume that this was a warning to everyone who is looking to take down the deep state. Trump's reaction to the mid-air collision leads me to believe that he knows it wasn't really an accident. He can't come out and say it because it would send panic and fear into the hearts of every American. No one is safe. This mid-air collision in D.C. wouldn't be the first military aircraft to crash since Trump has been inaugurated again. It wouldn't have been the first one this week. The day prior, an F-35 fighter jet crashed in Alaska. This occurred the day before the big 3 confirmation hearings. Again, coincidence? Some may recall that when Trump became president back in 2017, there was a rash of military aircrafts crashing during his first year in office, according to Wikipedia. 2017, 14 March. United States Air Force Pilatus U-28A 08-0742 CN 724 of the 318th Special Operations Squadron crashes in a field southeast of the Clovis Municipal Airport while practicing at a low altitude the emergency turn-back maneuver, during which the aircraft simulates engine failure and a return to the landing field. 3 United States Air Force servicemen were fatally wounded. The aircraft entered a stall and lost control as a result of pilot error. 17 April. U.S. Army Sikorsky UH-80 Black Hawk 90-26303CN 70-1537 of the 12th Aviation Battalion crashes onto a golf course in Leonardtown, Maryland. One of the three crewmen was pronounced dead at the scene. 2 May. United States Air Force MQ-9 Reaper, based at Holloman Air Force Base, crashed near the base while on a regularly scheduled training mission. July 10th. United States Marine Corps Lockheed Martin KC-130T Buno 16-5000 CN-5303 Triple Nuts Yankee 72 crashes on a flight in LaFleur County, Mississippi, killing at least 16 people on board. The USMC released a statement calling the event a mishap. The United States Marine Corps released a statement stating that, quote, indications are that something went wrong at cruise altitude. Brigadier General James also said that there were 2 impact sites about a mile apart. 12 August. A U.S. Navy McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet based on USS Nimitz overruns the runway at Bahrain International Airport due to an engine failure. The pilot makes a successful ejection. September 5th. Unknown model Air Force aircraft crashes at Nevada Test and Training Range, killing the pilot. Spokespeople decline to state the type of aircraft. 28 September, United States Marine Corps Bell Boeing MB-22B YP-01-16-8281 operating in Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve is destroyed in a hard landing. 2 people aboard the aircraft were injured. November 22nd. U.S. Navy Grumman C-2A Greyhound Buno 16-2175 CN-55 of VRC-30 crashes in the Philippine Sea about 500 nautical miles southeast of Okinawa Island, Japan. Of the 11 people aboard, 8 are rescued, but the U.S. Navy and the Japanese Self-Defense Force search for the remaining 3 until November 24th. Wreckage of the aircraft is found on December 29th in 5,640 meters, 18,500 feet of water. The plane carried out connection flights between Iwakuni Marine Corps Air Station and the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan. 2018, January 20th. A U.S. Army Boeing AH-64E Apache crashes during training at the base in the Mojave Desert, California, killing both pilots. These could all just be accidents, and nothing nefarious about any of them. Maybe some were accidents, some sabotage. Maybe they were all sabotage. No one could know for sure. And Trump certainly wouldn't tell the country if they were sabotage. If Americans believed that any airplane they traveled on could be taken down at any time, or any train could be derailed, or most cars they drove could be crashed into oncoming traffic by, being taken over remotely, no one would leave their homes. Early on in Trump's first presidency, there were rumors that U.S. military equipment was built using cheap Chinese steel. Even worse, there was talk that Chinese computer chips were installed in U.S. military vehicles and missiles that allowed them to be hacked and controlled remotely. The idea was that China was hacking U.S. military aircraft and crashing them as a warning to Trump. Chinese computer chips would need to be removed and replaced quickly. There has been talk that a trans pilot was aboard the Black Hawk helicopter in the recent mid-air collision. Who knows if this is true, or if they were actually piloting the helicopter or being used as a patsy. It's plausible that a crazy and or mind-controlled trans hates what Trump is doing and wanted to kill people as a result, including themselves. It's also plausible that they're being used as a scapegoat, or there wasn't actually a trans pilot on the helicopter at all. Isn't it a coincidence that just days, maybe hours, prior to the mid-air collision, Andy Ngo reported on X that there was a trans terror cult that has been killing people, including a Border Patrol guard? Is it a coincidence that this mid-air collision occurred the same week China came out with their AI systems available to the public, or the week after Trump held a press conference stressing the need to build up AI within America? Until I hear of information that convinces me that the mid-air collision was an accident, I'll assume it was not. What I don't know is whether or not it was the act of a crazy person, the manipulation of a crazy person, or if a crazy person was set up as a patsy. The scenario that makes the most sense to me at this time is that the deep state cabal are warning Trump and Trump's cabinet appointees that they can be gotten to. They aren't completely insulated. They aren't safe. So be careful who you go after and how hard you go after them. I'm sure, like everything else, we'll know more details later. The 72-hour rule is in effect. Don't get sucked into anything just because it supports your bias. There are a lot of people out there who claim to be on your side who are actually trying to lead us astray. That is the next one from the brilliant Erik Carlson. Hey, go to epicminerals.net. You know why? Because at that location, on that website, you can get products that will detoxify your body from within. The first is the Zeolite Extra Spray, epicminerals.net, promo code Shapiro. Zeolite binds to heavy metals, it binds to microplastics, and it lets them flow freely out of your body in urine. Then, of course, there is the Colloidal Silver Extra Spray, which also acts as a detoxifying agent and is thought to provide some protection against electromagnetic toxicity. And then finally, the amazing Wellness Extra capsules with humic and fulvic acids. All of these have humic and fulvic acids, which make greater bioavailability and also provide binding to heavy metals. Get them all. Get them today at epicminerals.net. Promo code Shapiro. Next, Erik Carlson from badlands.substack.com. Reagan 2.0. Not just a system update, but a technological breakthrough. By Erik Carlson. I can hear the comments now. You're an idiot. Reagan was evil. Reagan was deep state. Reagan went to the Bohemian Grove. What about the Iran-Contra affair? I'm sure a few people won't even take the time to read the article and instead will head straight to the comment section to voice their opinion. I assume none of these same people also blame the dangerous batches of COVID vaccines on Trump, as though he could personally control every batch that went out and every injection that was administered, all while insisting that Trump is a puppet of the Jews. To this, I just say, how do you account for what Trump is doing to the deep state today and at breakneck speed? We're seeing the complete and total destruction of the old guard. So, is he somehow setting us up for something by completely annihilating the deep state? I am going to try briefly to defend Ronald Reagan before moving on to presenting facts as unbiased as I am capable of doing. I believe Reagan understood that America was being invaded by Marxists. He fought the external communist threat, but viewed the internal threat as being more dangerous to America. I believe Reagan made some pretty big mistakes, mostly in trusting people he shouldn't have trusted. He was forced to take on George Bush as his VP, or rather succumbed to the pressure put on him by the deep state rhinos and neocons to do so. This almost cost him his life. After all, less than 6 weeks after becoming president, the deep state tried to kill him and replace him with their puppet and former director of the CIA, George Bush. I believe Reagan made concessions, and who can blame him? They tried to kill him, and who knows what kind of threats were made against his family. He wasn't perfect, far from it. He made mistakes. He allowed corruption to occur on his watch and from within the White House itself. I get it. I understand it all. I think we can all agree that bad stuff happened during Reagan's 8 years in office, and some of it he probably tried to cover up. Richard Nixon did the same thing when he realized the CIA was out to assassinate him politically. So, in judging Reagan, let's get beyond defining the mistakes he made and ask ourselves, what condition was America in when Reagan took office? What condition was America and its perceived enemies in when he left office? And how quickly did Marxism overtake America after Reagan left office? Now, for my attempt at being unbiased, I present all the similarities and connections I see between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. On February 6th, 2025, commemorating the 114th birthday of Ronald Reagan, President Trump added a portrait of the 40th President of the United States to his Oval Office. In celebration of Reagan's birthday, Trump had this to say, quote, "Today, we celebrate the birthday of Ronald Reagan, a giant of American history, a lion of freedom and liberty, and the 40th President of the United States." In 1980, Reagan's common-sense political vision propelled him to the Oval Office, ushering in a new era of prosperity and peace at home and abroad. The Reagan Revolution was underway. Throughout his 8 years as commander-in-chief, the economy boomed, confidence soared, communism collapsed, and faith in our nation's promise thrived and flourished like never before, signaling a renaissance of the American conservative movement. Today, we honor President Reagan's legacy, bringing common sense back to Washington and fortifying the causes of prosperity, safety, security, and peace that he cherished so deeply. As we enter America's golden age, we remember the indelible mark President Reagan left on our nation, and we commit to carrying the torch of liberty and justice for generations to come. Happy birthday, Ronald Reagan. Maybe I'm missing something here, but this seems to be pretty high praise for the former president. It's hard to misinterpret what Trump had to say about Reagan or find some hidden meaning. So, how do you go about supporting Trump while still vilifying Reagan as the evil deep state puppet they believe him to be? This would likely create cognitive dissonance, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Let's now look at some similarities and connections between Trump and Reagan in no particular order. To start, the expression MAGA, which Trump supporters proudly call themselves and wear on red baseball caps to the dismay of liberals everywhere, comes from Reagan. MAGA, the expression adorned by Trump supporters and willingly displayed, elicits scorn, ridicule, and disgust that is heaped upon them. The expression first came about during Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign, where he used the campaign slogan, "Let's make America great again." Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump met many times in person. This is a fact that cannot be disputed. It's pretty clear that Reagan had an impact on Trump and molded at least some of his political views and approaches. What is uncertain is how much of a relationship Reagan had with Trump behind the scenes in private. What is a known fact is that Reagan hired Rudy Giuliani to be his associate attorney general in 1981. Giuliani voluntarily took a demotion in 1983 to become the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. A couple of years later, possibly with the help of new Atlantic City casino owner Donald Trump, Giuliani took down the New York mafia crime families. I believe Trump, Reagan, and Giuliani worked together in unison to accomplish this task. Some will try to downplay the relationship between Reagan and Trump, and some will even say that Trump idolized Reagan, but that Reagan didn't care for Donald Trump. In a 2024 interview with ABC News, Liz Cheney said, quote, "There's absolutely no chance that Ronald Reagan would be supporting Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't stand for any of the things that Ronald Reagan did, and it's another place where I would urge my Republican colleagues in Congress and across the country to really look at Donald Trump's policies, to really look at the danger that he represents, to look at what he was willing to do to stay in power," end quote. It seems all the right people in politics and media want to drive a wedge between Reagan and Trump, to minimize their relationship, and even to suggest that Reagan despised Trump and that Trump doesn't stand for the same values as Reagan. I see this as nothing more than a neocon and rhino attempt to keep Trump from getting back in power, where they fear he can expose and dismantle their deep state operations. When Reagan campaigned to be president, Iran was holding 52 American hostages. Once he became president, the hostages were released. When Trump was campaigning for president, Hamas was holding American and Israeli hostages. Once Trump became president again, a plan was initiated to release the hostages. Whether or not side deals were made ahead of time in either of these cases is impossible to know. I'm simply showing the commonality. Reagan refused to fund Jimmy Carter's newly created U.S. Department of Education. After Reagan left office, Bush fully funded it in lockstep with the Democrats. With Bush in office, America quickly had political correctness in their universities, and critical theory was a part of every school's agenda. Marxism, which was suppressed for 8 years, suddenly took off. Trump plans not only to defund the Department of Education, but to take it one step further and shut it down completely. Election surveys show that Generation X, the generation that grew up with Reagan as their president, is by far the most Trump-supporting generation. So there's that. Noted here is Generation X Saving America, Erik Carlson, December 21st, 2024. I should get to that one later. Not today, though. This will be the last one. The U.S. hosted the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics during Reagan's presidency. This event brought with it a resurgence of American pride throughout the nation. Los Angeles will host the Olympics again in 2028 during Trump's presidency. What are the odds? Reagan was a Hollywood actor who forced movie executives to make pro-American movies during his presidency. Some believe movies like Rambo, Rocky IV, and Red Dawn played vital roles in the fall of Soviet Union. Donald Trump is a former Hollywood celebrity who, in my opinion, is in the process of taking over Hollywood. After all, I believe the merger between Skydance Media and Paramount Global is the start of a new Hollywood, a Hollywood controlled to a certain extent by Trump, which I discussed in a recent feature, A New Hollywood. Erik Carlson, February 6th. Wow. I should get to that one too. Both Reagan and Trump were former Democrats who received blue-collar support to become president. They also brought minority support to the Republican Party, support that traditionally and almost exclusively was owned by the Democrats. Deregulation and tax cuts are tools both Reagan and Trump have used and will continue to use at an even greater magnitude to stimulate the American economy and give Americans financial relief. As I pointed out before, I believe Trump is working towards the elimination of income tax as a whole. Immigration reform is another thing the former and current presidents have in common. In 1986, Reagan made it illegal to hire undocumented workers. In 2025, we are experiencing a mass exodus of illegal aliens leaving America, some voluntarily, while others are being forced out. Interesting fact. Reagan didn't want Spanish to become America's second language. He thought it would create division within the country and would prevent immigrants from assimilating. When Reagan took office in 1981, America's greatest perceived enemy was the Soviet Union. When Trump took office in 2017, the country's greatest perceived enemy was and still is Russia. Shortly after Reagan left office, the Soviet Union fell. I believe that soon Americans will no longer see Russia as being its greatest enemy. Reagan and Trump understand and understood that the Democrat Party has been taken over by socialism. From a 2021 article in the Washington Times, quote, in 1964, Mr. Reagan warned of socialism and declared, as many do today, that Democrats were taking the party of Jefferson, Jackson, and Cleveland down the road under the banners of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin. He went on to say that those, quote, who would trade our freedom for the soup kitchen of the welfare state have told us they have a utopian solution of peace without victory, end quote. Reagan and Trump were and are Jacksonian populists. Both hung and currently hang portraits of Andrew Jackson in their Oval offices. What do Jacksonian populists support? Anti-establishment, non-career politicians, the strengthening of the executive branch, ending the monopoly of government by elites, and creating greater rights for the common man in opposition to aristocracy. Reagan and Trump stood in opposition to affirmative action. Affirmative action is defined as the active effort to improve employment, educational, and other opportunities for members of groups that have been subjected to discrimination, as we have experienced. What something claims to be and what it really is often greatly differ. From day one in office, Trump has decimated the DEI agenda the liberal socialists have established. DEI could be considered affirmative action on steroids. While both presidents had a goal of shrinking the size of the American government, they both share a unique way of doing it. Both presidents staffed administration officials with officials who oppose the agencies they head. Some officials have been put in place with the sole purpose of eliminating the department they head, such as Linda McMahon, or of completely gutting and transforming their department, such as RFK Jr. Both men survived unsuccessful assassination attempts. Reagan was shot 6 weeks after being inaugurated. If successful, the former director of the CIA, George Bush, would have become the 41st president 8 years earlier. Trump was shot while campaigning for president. I suppose the deep state couldn't afford to have Trump in office again for 6 weeks like Reagan. After all, look what Trump has already done in just a few weeks. Trump and Reagan both professed to being Christians. Reagan professed to being a born-again, Bible-believing evangelical Christian. Trump professes to being a Christian back to his childhood, but since his assassination attempt, his faith appears to have strengthened even more. Both men have blended families. Reagan had children from 2 marriages, while Trump has children from 3. I could go on describing more similarities and connections, but I think the reader gets the point. So I will leave you with one more commonality that I find very interesting. Dr. Anthony Fauci. The AIDS epidemic started in 1981, the same year Reagan became president. Fauci was put in charge of researching, treating, and eradicating the disease. I, like many others, believe that it was the treatment that caused the deaths, specifically AZT, a harsh chemotherapy drug taken off the market in the 1960s because it was killing too many people. Roughly 7.5 months before the 2020 election, the U.S. was locked down for a so-called virus known as COVID. I, like many others, believe that the treatments, remdesivir and ventilators, and later intentionally tainted batches of vaccines that have caused most of the deaths, not to mention the demonization by the government agencies and the media of successful, reliable, and inexpensive remedies. The fear and anxiety created didn't help matters either. Was Fauci used twice to derail an America First president? Was Fauci used twice to remove a president who was an enemy of the deep state? I don't recall Fauci being used to propagandize any other epidemics while known deep state puppet presidents were in office. What are the odds that so many similarities and connections exist between Reagan and Trump? Is it 100 to 1? 1,000 to 1? 1,000,000 to 1? In reality, there are no coincidences, and in my opinion, both men were and are enemies of the deep state. One man tried to protect America from its enemies from within and outside of its borders. The other understands that the enemy must not only be protected against, it must be completely eradicated. If not, this enemy will eventually rear its ugly head again, just a little further down the road. That's our show. Erik Carlson. I've missed reading his work, and I will get to more of his work tomorrow on Reading Epic Threads because I've been gone for a while. Don't forget, I am now fully independent. Please follow this channel, P. Gunnels, right here on Rumble. Follow me on Twitter or X at pgunnels1, the numeral 1. And of course, check my Substack out, readingepicthreads.substack.com. And don't forget, go to castorblend.com, castorblend.com to learn more about castor oil, how powerful it is, and how you can heal yourself with it using the amazing Castor Blend. Promo code Shapiro. Let's pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.